Hello, I'm Pip Courtney and welcome to a new year and a taste of Landline.
It's fantastic tasting fish.
They are a desert plant. They like sandy, well-drained soil.
Chefs have a new Australian fish to put on their fine dining menus. Known by Queensland's recreational fishermen as black kingfish, cobia is drawing praise and awards from some of the country's top foodies, who've dubbed it the Wagyu of the sea. With 3 high-end restaurants and the catering contract for the Caulfield racetrack, Melbourne chef Ian Curley feeds thousands of diners every week. And he's fussy. The premium ingredients he buys have to tick a lot of boxes, and he says cobia ticks them all.
I actually love the taste of it and how clean it tastes. You want something new on your menu that's both sustainable and also interesting and tastes fantastic, because, you know, no disrespect to barramundi or salmon and stuff like that, but it's kind of been done. And also, I'm not a big fan of seeing stuff that I see in the supermarket. I think it should be something that you can actually, you should go to a restaurant and it should be a little bit special.
He's using cobia because of its versatility. Its quality means he can serve it raw as sashimi or cooked.
It holds its moisture very well. It's economical. You get great return from the body of it, and it's fantastic tasting fish. I think if you can't see, it's still moist in the middle.
Josh Roydhouse works for Victoria's largest seafood wholesaler. 85% of the state's hatted restaurants are clients, and they're fussy too.
The $64 question that every chef asks me is, Josh, what fish can I put on the menu that's not salmon, ocean trout or barramundi? What's different? What's going to excite my customers? And cobia is a great option for that. It has great applications in top-end dining. It has great applications in banquets. It's very forgiving, so it can stay on the pass if it needs to. I think it'll get bigger. Don't worry about that. They're going to get bigger.
Which is just what Maria Mitras-Honus wants to hear. For her family company, Pacific Reef, runs the country's only cobia farm. She's been inspired by her media-shy father, Nick Mitras, a Greek migrant who started with one fish shop in outer Melbourne 40 years ago, who went on to make millions in the gaming industry.
What started out as an experiment, so to speak, ended up being a product that we now carry.
When the project began, cobia was largely unknown by the general public.
I've seen the colour. Holy shit.
But it's a favourite with recreational fishers who call it black kingfish.
Here we go. Oh, he's got to be 30 kilos.
It's an amazing fighting fish, very powerful, very sleek sort of fish.
For Peter Lee, the lead scientist helping prawn farmers find another fish for their ponds, the biggest challenge was understanding reproduction.
So that we could guarantee supplying the fingerlings on a particular day or a particular week for the prawn farm, because it needed to be down to that level of control. And so that led to quite a few years of research trying to understand the reproductive cycles of cobia in captivity and how we could use the environment, use temperature and day length to manipulate that so they could spawn on a day.
Now, you sent the fingerlings to a couple of prawn farms. Where in Queensland did they perform the best?
The early part of the project involved sending fingerlings to farms from southeast Queensland up to the north, and the production was much better up in the north. The growth rates were higher, and that's largely temperature driven. They're reasonable on food conversion, comparable to most other finfish, but it's the growth rates that's phenomenal for cobia. So they can achieve 5 kilos in a year. Other species that we grow in Australia, things like barramundi, might get to 1.5 to 2 kilos, yellowtail kingfish around 3 kilos.
They're great numbers, but it took several years to get them. Crucial was Australian stock and fish food company Ridley, which tweaked the feed it had developed for Hiramusha kingfish.
What we began to feed the fish was a barramundi diet, and obviously it's not ideal, but it was the only diet that we could get our hands on to begin with. We later then worked with the company, that's Ridley Agri Products, and we came up, they specially formulated a feed for the cobia, and that's when things really started to turn the corner. And what's great about Ridley's is they specifically source sustainable ingredients. That's a big plus for us.
And for chefs too, as Ian Curley says diners are increasingly insisting on sustainable produce.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's a new buzzword. It's the thing with it is you don't want to be having. You've got to know in your head that what you're taking and feeding to people, it's got to be the best possible out there. You've got to make sure that they've got best practice and they're looked after.
We're selling into some of the best restaurants in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane. The reaction's been phenomenal from them. They love it. One chef even made the comment that he thought it was the Wagyu of the sea.
Cobia's passed the chef test, but Pacific Reefs always wanted the nod from the wider foodie community. That chance came late last year at the annual Royal Agricultural Society of New South Wales's President's Medal Dinner. In a show of hands, most in the room admitted they'd never heard of cobia. But Chef Tim Brown was determined to change that.
It's actually a good fish to fillet. It's still firm, but the fattiness in the fish, you can just feel how smooth it is. Like, you can tell it's a great fish.
The President's Medal is unusual, as it's the only award in Australia which judges producers on financial, social and environmental factors, as well as product quality.
That looks amazing!
Tim Brown planned a complex entree to show cobia off to 360 black-tie diners. He says the healthy omega fats, which are good for diners, make it ideal for chefs.
Like Wagyu, it has a good fat content marbled through the product, so it is a good product. And for restaurants, it's a great product because, you know, it is a sashimi grade product, so it can be used in entrees, and it also can be used in main courses.
The Pacific Reef Farm is close to the coast and the Great Barrier Reef. The judges were impressed with the efforts the company's made to ensure the water leaving the farm is clean.
When I first started this job 10 years ago, aquaculture always struggled to win because they had serious questions over the sourcing of their food. It came from unsustainable fish stocks in South America and then came through China in a very controlled input system. They've overcome that. They have 100% Australian sourced fish food. Cobia has a problem in that it's not a known fish. What they can do now is say that they are at the upper echelons of agricultural achievement in Australia. Their product is good, their practices are good.
The level of interest and experience around the table when we come together is pretty inspiring, yeah.
Hello, I'm Tim Lee. The Australian Kelpie is considered the best all-round stock dog on Earth. The breed has gone around the globe, from the dusty outback to chasing reindeer in the Arctic. But the breed's origins have long been shrouded in mystery. Somewhere in the heather-clad hills and snow-capped peaks of the Scottish Highlands, shrouded in the mists of time, lie some elusive answers about an almost mythical creature, the Australian Kelpie. The Kelpie takes its name from a water spirit of Scottish folklore, and one man's quest to discover the origins of this famous Australian working dog in the land of his ancestors has taken him 12 years and halfway around the globe.
That journey took us to the north of Scotland because the Kelpie breed was supposedly bred by this aristocratic breed of dogs called Rutherford Collies that came from Dunrobin Castle in north of Scotland.
Bill has certainly, followed the Kelpie trail, wherever it has taken him and, essentially dragged Kerry along in most instances on that journey.
Kerry Robertson has, for the most part, been a willing accomplice.
That's the thing that I enjoy the most, is going overseas and meeting different people. And that is, to me, is the highlight. I know he's gathering information and that, but I do like meeting all the different people that we've met.
There's no dispute that the Kelpie is derived from Scottish Collies in Australia in the 1870s. But precisely how the breed came about has remained a much murkier mystery.
There was 26 versions of that we had counted of how the Kelpie dog originated and where it came from.
Discovering, gathering and dissecting all the evidence, sorting likely fact from probable fiction, has been a huge undertaking.
That was probably the most expensive thing I did in my life, was say that I'm going to find out just what really did happen.
The result, an impressive, recently published 300-page book, Origins of the Australian Kelpie, is being well received.
He's produced a humdinger of a book. Great credit to him, it's a lovely book.
Tony Parsons is the best qualified person in Australia to make that observation. He's owned and bred Kelpies since the mid-1940s, gathered a lifetime of information and written extensively about them. So what is it that people find so captivating about the Kelpie?
Well, his willingness to work under all conditions. His willingness to be adapted, for example, from a paddock dog, he's been developed so that now he works in the yards and it works to a high standard. The substance of the fact is that we've produced the best all-round stock dog in the world.
Tony Parsons goes as far to say that without such a capable dog, Australia's spectacular path to prosperity from wool would not have been so.
The Kelpie was providentially, like a gift from heaven sort of thing, given to the sheepmen of Australia, and from that time on he's occupied a tremendous place.
Good girl, Lando, man.
It would have been virtually impossible in some places to run sheep without the Kelpie.
I've seen them so sore they didn't know which foot to put down because they've got bindies in every foot, and you've got to say, wow, that's a courageous dog. And that's where my passion comes from, seeing him work in the backcountry.
Bill was just adamant right from the very beginning that, this story was so critical to Australia's prosperity that we had this wonderful, well-recognised story of, the wool industry supporting Australia's prosperity, but underneath that was the dog. And so he was really determined that that dog could share in the limelight of the wool industry and, basically Australia's riding on the sheep's back.
The Australian Kelpie is a great icon. Whether you know dog types or a city person, if you've heard of a Kelpie, straight away you think of an Australian working dog, and they are an Australian icon.
It's always been rumoured that the dingo was crucial to the breed's development. Bill Robertson believes that science now proves it so.
I decided that I'd get the University of New South Wales to do DNA testing on some foundation bloodlines.
Bill Robertson paid for the tests and the chief geneticist, Alan Wilton, conducted them.
The final analysis was that there was between 3 and 4% dingo markers in the Kelpie strain, and those dingoes were both from Fraser Island and mainland Australia.
So when did the dingo genes come in?
The dingo infusion happened right at the very beginning with the first bitch called Kelpie on Warwick Homestead in Casterton in 1870. Her mother, a bitch called Bess, this has never been mentioned, but a bitch called Bess was mated to a dingo.
Warwick Station in Western Victoria is acknowledged as the breed's birthplace. The property was renowned for its fine collie sheepdogs derived from Scottish bloodlines. But why has there never been any mention of a dingo?
In those early days, to own a dingo, to have anything complimentary about a dingo, it was treason. And there's authors who have actually stated that.
Seen as the scourge of sheepmen, most states had serious penalties for possessing a crossbred dingo. And so, says Bill Robertson, the real Kelpie origins were a much guarded secret, though the imprint of the dingo is unmistakable.
It was the spirit, the grit, the ability to handle the heat, and the never say die characteristic.
Dog breeding has forever been a highly secretive world of intense commercial rivalry. But Bill Robertson is confident he has shed some new light on one of the great Australian mysteries, the real origins of this much-loved breed.
They really are the engine room of the shearing team that come onto the station to shear our ewes.
I think a day shearing is something like playing 3 AFL matches in a day. So, yeah, they burn through the calories pretty quick.
It astounds me even still sometimes, because you'll get people that just, you can't fill up.
If you've got a good cook and keeps the team happy, it makes a hell of a difference.
It's the core of a good team. If you've got a good cook, everybody's happy.
Hello, I'm Kerry State. A remote parcel of red soil in the middle of the country has been transformed into a watermelon farm. It's the first time a commercial horticulture operation has been set up on Indigenous land in the Northern Territory. As daybreak reveals the familiar outlines of the desert landscape, it also highlights an unexpected shape spinning between the spinifex. This is a watermelon farm, 370 kilometres north of Alice Springs.
The farm where we are now, there was nothing here, it was just spinifex and these trees. Might have been a couple of white fellas walked on this country, but it hadn't been cleared or anything. It's sort of like a dream to me to come onto a farm that no one had ever developed.
Paul McLaughlin knows a thing or two about these giants of the fruit world. He used to be one of the biggest watermelon growers in the country, producing more than 20,000 tonnes a year off his properties in New South Wales and the Northern Territory.
Don't expose them too much, because if you pull the leaves off, they'll sunburn.
While growing such a water-filled fruit in Australia's arid interior may seem like an odd match, he says it works.
We had 2 bins of large today, the rest was extra large, so 7 kilo plus.
That's good, that's what we want. They like those big melons. They are a desert plant. They like sandy, well-drained soil. They like consistent temperatures, and we get that in the desert. It's pretty hot during the day, cooler nights, low humidity, which is important for watermelon.
That's not to say the local conditions are perfect. In such a dry area, the crops need regular irrigation, which is why establishing a bore field to tap into the aquifer was a priority. With not enough nutrients in the soil, the plants are also fertilised pretty much every other day. And Paul McLaughlin has had to come up with ways to protect against wind damage. But he says overall the melons, which originally came from Queensland, have flourished in the Red Centre.
It's gone well. We get probably higher yields than we've got on other farms. And usually in the autumn we get very good prices for the melons too, because the quality's so good, and it's hard to produce that sort of quality anywhere else in Australia.
This farm isn't just novel because of what's growing here. It's also the first time in the Northern Territory that a commercial horticulture operation has been set up on Indigenous land at the request of the local community. The farm, called Desert Springs, is just down the road from the community Ali Kurung. Until recently, this was Spinifex country and a good place to find bush tucker. But now locals like Mark Brown and Arana Rice come to pick up watermelons instead.
Good one.
Yes, good one.
We're ready to pick?
Yeah.
We'll be in here tomorrow picking these melons.
Why did you want to grow watermelons?
Well, it's good to have. The kids wanted to have a feed one of these melons, you know. Everybody, even adults, can enjoy eating melon. Oh, everyone do.
Good one.
Mark Brown was among a group of locals that flew to Paul McLaughlin's New South Wales farm 9 years ago to ask him to come and grow watermelons on their land.
They are very connected to their land, more than what we really realise. And so really it's probably a bit of an honour really to be asked. We might head back into town, eh?
Mr McLaughlin now has a 90-year licence to farm this country. So far, he's producing up to 5,000 tonnes off around 100 hectares. And Centre Farm, an agency set up by the Central and Northern Land Councils to help develop Aboriginal country, says there's the potential to use an area 5 times that size for horticulture.
The whole land trust is not required. A small portion of it is required, at which point the land that these guys fought so hard for is still, for the most part, not taken up by non-cultural activity. It's taken up by mostly cultural activity with a small portion of it used for Western-style activity, which ultimately the elders would like those younger people to be able to walk in both worlds more comfortably than what they can.
Among the elders is Arana Rice's father, Mick Walker.
Look at that one, eh?
Oh, got him again.
Got him.
He used to work on a small farm in Ali Kurung, where he grew watermelons among other fruit and vegetables.
Come here, one.
He also had a dream 50 years ago that a big watermelon farm would one day be set up outside the community.
It was a dream come true. And it's a future for our kids, and their kids.
Among those heading out to the farm to work is Mick Walker's grandson, Nigel Small.
Had some problems, eh?
Yeah, the battery.
Oh, the battery.
Yep.
We'll head out there, eh?
Yep.
Paul McLaughlin first taught Nigel about growing fruit and vegetables at the school garden. Now the 15-year-old has graduated to something bigger, planting, weeding and picking on a commercial scale. What would you like to be in the future?
Be a farmer. Yeah.
As another load of produce hits the road, Paul McLaughlin remains confident his inland adventure will also provide new experiences and opportunities for the people who brought him here, even if it takes a while to reach those goals.
Always knew it was a long-term project, and my hope and dream was after 10 or 20 years there'd be people from the local community out here, and eventually they would take over this farm and be growing crops themselves on this farm. And I still believe that will happen.
And whether the landowners choose to work here or not, Vin Lange says what's growing on their country is an important step, which could lead to much bigger things.
The traditional landowners want to develop their country. If we're serious about developing the north for food production, for example, we cannot leave the 52% of the land mass of the Northern Territory out of that equation. It's critical. So it's absolutely more than an employment project. This is the start of developing Aboriginal lands across the whole territory.
We're trying to maximise the returns out of each individual block.
Well, that's the program. We hope you enjoyed it. And we'll be with you right through January with a taste of Landline.
The world's best steak producer, Alber's Australia Wagyu.
It's all happening in the beer now as well, all sorts of wonderful and weird flavours and aromas. It's fantastic.
I'll see you for those stories next week. Bye for now.